Hello and welcome to this edition of Outlook Facebook Live, which is also being broadcast live on our YouTube channel. Today, we'll be looking at how this pandemic has impacted students who study or want to study abroad. But before I introduce our special guest, I must point out that given the extremely fluid situation that prevails, one can only offer various options instead of a hard and fast solution or answers. With that said, may I introduce Professor Saikat Majumdar, a writer, academic, and a popular commentator on arts, literature, and education. He has taught at Stanford University, was named a fellow at the Humanities Center at Wellesley College, and is currently professor of English and creative writing at Ashoka University and a columnist for Outlook. He's the author of several books, both fiction and nonfiction, and the recipient of grants and fellowships from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Jawaharlal Nehru Institute of Advanced Studies, and the University of Chicago, as well as the Stanford Humanities Center. Thank you so much, Professor Majumdar, for joining us. Let me start by asking you a very, very fundamental question. Given the pandemic and its fallout, what are the 2 or 3 main things that students who have, returned from the universities abroad or were planning to go abroad keep in mind? What are the 2 or 3 key things that they must sort of keep in mind while they are thinking of what to do next?
Thank you, Ramananda, for the question. And thank you, Outlook, for this opportunity. And welcome all to this session. We are living in very vulnerable times. Really, nobody saw this coming. And I have to say that this is more vulnerable for students. And there are a number of reasons. Students are obviously a younger population. Their lives are still taking shape. They are still transitional. Their careers, the careers are in place. So they are particularly vulnerable. And that being said, this is a pandemic, and pandemic is essentially a disease on a jet plane. An epidemic globalized. So the good thing about that is, a good thing about this terrible thing is that everybody is in the same boat. Everybody worldwide is in the same boat. And it's one of my colleagues said that worldwide, the spring semester of 2020 will have an asterisk next to it. So nobody will sort of be harsh on you for not doing well this semester. It's completely understandable. Of course, it's very clear it's not going to end right now, but we are all there. Now, at the same time, it's also not quite right to say that we're all on the same boat. I think this pandemic has made it very clear the differences of privilege. Both in India and in the US and other countries, because of campuses closing, a lot of people have not only lost, a lot of students have not only lost their academic sort of resources, they've lost literally their homes. They've literally lost a ticket to a meal. This shows that how dependent we are on this residential learning situation. So in some ways, those of us who are thinking about study abroad, we are already in a fairly privileged position. So we should be fortunate. With that group, I'd say there are primarily 3 things I'd suggest you can do. I mean, this is a very fluid situation. Nobody knows how things are going to unfold. So nobody can give really advice. I can only offer it in the spirit of suggestion. 3 things are safety, self-directed study, and self-care. I mean, safety first. I mean, this is clearly a very serious disease, and you can't compromise on any safety measures. Please follow everything the government and other authorities are telling you. Stay safe, take care of your health. Self-directed study is probably what I'd say is the most important thing I could tell the students. See, the thing about studies is that it goes the older, the younger the students are especially vulnerable in this situation. Because what happens in academics is that the older you become, the more independent you become. The process goes on. From being a kind of a passive consumption to production. You start taking part in the process. So like the oldest. So in a way, this pandemic has forced people to take responsibility of their own studies. Coursera.
Yes, I understand that, but let me approach this thing from another way. As it is, digital education was becoming increasingly common. I mean, worldwide. But people who study abroad they want to go there for the campus experience as well.
Right.
So how does that change? And would you agree? I'm
I
sorry.
think,
Did you
I
miss
think,
my last question, right?
I think
I'll
that
just
we
repeat that again.
yeah, sure.
I'll just repeat that again. Education has gone increasingly digital even before the pandemic.
Hmm.
But people who want to go abroad to study, students who want to
Hmm.
go abroad to study, usually do so for the campus experience as well.
Right.
So,
Right.
if people who, let's say, apply to Stanford or wherever, they go there because they'll be in the company of very eminent people and things like that. So, how
Right.
does that change? Number one, and B, do you think that there's this school of thought which says that digital education hardens the education system against things like public national disasters and epidemics?
Right, right. Yeah, I think the biggest loss, in a sense, this is a moment which has pushed our remote and online learning skills like to make leaps ahead. I'm teaching my classes online at Ashoka, and there are things one can do through Google Hangouts we haven't discovered. The biggest loss for people who are going abroad is indeed the campus. The purely academic component of the education is not impossible to reproduce. It's possible to do that, but education is much more than the content given by the instructor. I was thinking of one of the Harvard educationist Howard Gardner's sort of joking speeches, and that in the 60s he said that, oh, who needs the professors? All we need is each other. We need the peers and the library. So one thing that you stand to lose is the company of your peers. So one advice I'd give students is that, maintain peer contact. That is really important. The community of students that you learn from, that is something you may lose. And again, the kind of the campus part, it's really the academic part, as I said, is not hard to reproduce. At Ashoka, we were planning to teach a course in jointly with Wellesley College. Before this pandemic hit, we were already planning to collaborate online, and half of it was already there. Now it has to be fully online. But the difference is, of course, the campus life. Most people want to go. That is something which is going to be really hard. And I think I'm hearing from different sources that many universities are saying that we'll start a semester online. Now a lot of students are already started saying, is it the same thing? And clearly, big part of our learning experience is being in a new country, experiencing the culture. That is going to be much harder, and a student has to take the call whether they really want to spend the time and money. But at the same time, I think what I'd say, the longer term advice I'd give the students is that, this pandemic is not just going to be for a semester. It may very well be longer, and I'd say take a break. I'd say it's time to take a break. I mean, for Indian students, especially those going from college to higher education, it has been kind of in a treadmill. You finish college, you go into grad school, you go into professional school. If you look at students in the West, they often take a break. They work, they do an internship, they travel around. Now, travel is an option that might be maybe out right now, but this is a time to maybe do other kinds of stuff, gain some maturity, sort of do self-directed study, do whatever kind of work you can online, reflect. I always suggest that students read, and and return to grad school a more mature person. This is almost a forced opportunity to gather maturity. But yeah, so I think it's a
I
very
get it.
complex.
I get it. You take a break. That's what you're suggesting. You take a break and wait for things to even out. But from the university's point of view, how do you think they're going to reassure students that they're safe from, that they're pandemic proof in future? Will that sort of, and in that sense, do you think Indian universities should see this as an opportunity to sort of boost students who may have otherwise gone abroad?
I think so. I think there's a very interesting article by the Vice Chancellor of Jindal University, C. Rajkumar, who sort of says that this is a great opportunity for Indian universities. And I was reading an interview by an Oxford expert on global education who says that the situation is not likely to be normal for the next 5 years. And Western universities, as you know, I mean, this has really hit North America and Europe much harder, are very likely to be in trouble for the next 5 years. And this is a very complex kind of a reason. One is, of course, their own funding is suffering, but in many ways, a lot of students from East Asia, Africa are not going to be in a position to travel abroad. And a lot of universities in the West really depend on the fee paying students. So what happens when when an economy goes into depression is that people actually migrate to universities. So it's very possible the domestic population might vie towards the universities, but they are not the ones who actually pay the cost. The cost is actually borne by the fee paying students from overseas, with exception of universities like Harvard and Stanford, which have massive endowments. They can dig into that. They can keep going. Even then, endowments take a beating, but they can still keep going. But for other universities, it's going to be a huge beating. And I was reading this expert said that East Asia is likely to emerge as a big hub of education, and a lot of students will actually start migrating towards East Asia. So I think in the same way, it's actually an opportunity. India has not been as hugely affected by this epidemic as countries in North America and Western Europe. So this is an opportunity for Indian universities to really think what they can do in a combination of remote and online, how to ramp up their resources. So that's possible. um, I, I think some
You'll
questions.
notice a question that has come in from Amrita, but that's a very specific question. So I don't know whether you want to answer that.
Right, right. Hi, Amrita. Thanks for the question. I think this really, there's no blanket advice for this. One has to be taken case by case. I think one needs to look at which country this is. For instance, New Zealand is a country which has really dealt with this situation very well. So I imagine universities in New Zealand might be doing much better. On the other hand, USA is not doing very well, a prime destination for. I think one has to look at what they're offering. Western universities I've taught and studied in the US for many years, they're actually very professional about these things. They will take a judgment call. I just read, I think yesterday on CNN, that even 2021 session is likely to be online. Now, what kind of offer are they offering? Are they saying that, okay, it's going to be an online course, so you can take it from there? I think if that's the case, it's only fair that they reduce their fees, because it's not fair to charge the same tuition
Yes.
for a
In
kind
fact,
of.
that I was about to, use that as my next question, which is that, do you see a shift in the way universities approach, students now? Do you see this as an opportunity for many students here? Because universities abroad might slash their fees for students who are actually willing to come to campus.
Yeah, I think this is going to have a really large economic fallout, because it's somebody said that there'd be a scramble, because universities this is big business, and if they can't offer the on-campus experience, I think it's probably very likely that they will have to do some kind of an adjustment. At the same time, I think it's very likely that domestic demand for universities will go up, because if this pandemic is followed by a depression, so typically what happens when the economy is down, people flock to universities. So, and this happens
Hmm.
even more in graduate school. If there are no jobs, you go back to grad school. And so if that happens, if that's the case, then I think there'll be more domestic students returning to universities and fewer international students. So I think the long-term patterns are very hard to say, but I keep hearing the term 5 year being repeated in many circles. So for some reason, people are fixated on that for the next 5 years. Things are not going to be the same, and it's very likely that the next academic year, 2021 year, it's not going to be campus business as usual. Even at the most, it will be staggered. Possible, the whole year might be online. So again, we need to wait maybe at least a couple of months to see how the summer unfolds to know that for
But
sure.
given that this pandemic has already caused such havoc across the higher education stream for students abroad, how do you think college will even manage to reassure students that we are safe now, that we are pandemic free?
I don't think anybody can provide that assurance. That's almost taking a position of a prophecy.
Yeah.
There's something like that's again going into the domain.
Did you miss that, or should I?
No, I mean, you're asking how they can assure, right? How they can assure whether they can, how they can,
Yeah,
yeah.
because that leads to my question that if they're going to maintain social distancing and things like that, the whole idea of life changes.
Yeah. I guess one has to go by things like whether a pandemic is due. From what I understand, it's possible to predict. I guess the last great pandemic was in 1918. So, one can say that when another pandemic is due. But at the same time, it's also very clear that, we've moved away from the age of epidemics to the age of pandemics. And this is something that is a fallout of globalization, travel. You know, at a time when people travel less, maybe we even the word pandemic is actually quite new, right? It's coined by WHO to describe this particular COVID-19 disease, that it's something which spreads from country to country, and this obviously will have an impact on international travel. What kind of international collaboration. And again, I see universities falling back on online collaborations, because it's also pretty clear that in the last 10 or 15 years, universities in the west are struggling. They're struggling to get students. They're struggling, and they've been increasingly looking to the kind of booming middle class and upper middle class in Asia, who can increasingly afford to send their children overseas. So they would not want that source of revenue to be cut down, and they will, I think, do everything they can to bring it back. But
We
there are
have
all
a
kinds.
very, interesting question now from Rashi Sharma, where he's
Mhm.
asking exactly what he just said, that, does it make sense then to go for a course that allows me to study for 2 years here and 2 years abroad, and then, and at the same time get a foreign degree? Is
Thank
that
you, Raj.
something that you feel is a good idea?
I think that's a great question. Thank you. I think this is exactly the kind of things we should be looking at right now, because there are many Indian universities which are doing all kinds of collaboration, and international education can be attained. The experience can be attained in various ways: a mix of online, part travel, summer abroad, study abroad. I think we'll have to really rethink this to a kind of patchwork way. And I think it's no longer one-way traffic. Indian students going abroad increasingly, like Ashoka University, where I teach, practically every week we get an invitation from some university abroad to start a collaboration. Universities in the West are as eager to collaborate with universities in India and China as it was the other way around. So definitely it's a two-way traffic. We our summer classes are populated by students from the overseas. So it's very much a two-way traffic. And there are many universities where in India you can get in and you can be assured of an international experience, either by a term abroad or when their students come. So the cultural experience happens in many ways. So I think that's a great idea, to join Indian colleges with overseas collaboration, which will also mean a kind of discount in the expenses. The expenses are also going to be much less, but the experience in the end will not be that different. So the other huge advantage of going to a prestigious college is the alumni network, right? We all know that the reason people want to get into Harvard and Yale is not just because of the quality of instruction. It's membership into a very elite club. Now, as
Right.
collaboration can get you some of these things, not all of it, but it's really about
Mhm.
entering that work. And I think we have to live with all that. Yes.
Yes, we have Prashant who's asking about Canada. Now, that's an interesting question because, from what we are hearing, Canada, the numbers are not as staggering as they are in the US in terms of this pandemic. So
Yeah.
that's why I thought it would be interesting. But there's a specific question on, whether I should take the permanent visa, residency visa, or should I just go on a student visa? Now, I don't know. That sounds like a very, very specific question, and I suspect it will depend on what they want to do. But would you
Yeah.
like to try answering that?
I mean, I wouldn't presume to advise on immigration matters, but Canada is actually a good location. I just advised a student a couple of weeks back who has offers from US universities, but he's very keen on McGill. And the first thing about Canadian universities is that the fees are much more affordable. If you're comparing with US universities, they're much more affordable. And I started my teaching career in Canada, in Ontario, and Canada can offer a much more interesting cultural experience than many locations in the US. And there are many reasons behind that. I'm not going into that. So, and as you said, Canada is a country which has been, relatively better shape in terms of the pandemic. So I think that's certainly an option. And for people who are looking to move into the US, the Canada has always been a kind of a stepping stone. So that's again a possibility. I think any decision has to be sort of backed up by careful study of the sort of health situation, public health situation around it, what kind of steps universities are taking, what are the provisions, what happens if something, can you immediately come back, can you afford a trip back home in a very short notice. So a family has to consider a lot of things now before something like this happens. The good thing is Western universities are very professional in these matters, because there's always the fear of litigation. They're very client driven. They're extremely responsible. So if they assure a certain offer, I think it comes with a certain degree of responsibility, as much as one can
But
do.
coming back to how this impacts Indian universities, do you sort of foresee now India becoming a hub for foreign students? As in, uh, given
You
that the
know,
numbers are not that great in India,
that's a great
and
question.
we do have excellent educational institutions.
Yeah, I mean, India is great. India, I think history is on India's side as far as higher education is concerned. It has been on India's side for the last 10, 20 years, but India is also great at blowing opportunities. India, and I think this is another great opportunity for India because, I mean, certainly where I am, Ashoka University, we have a lot of international collaborations going on. A lot of our faculty, a lot of us have taught abroad. We have international experience. Our curriculum is structured very much like an American liberal arts college, so the experience is not very different. And at the same time, we are adapted to a local condition. So there are many such universities which are certainly have, I mean, to go back to even the IITs were set up with this model in mind. I think this is a great opportunity for India to actually sort of take the traffic of foreign students. I mean, I'm thinking students from Africa, students from other parts of Southeast Asia, even from Latin America, which have been coming to India. There's a good chance, for all you know, even students from Europe might now look at East Asia, because in this region, East Asia is the leader, Japan, Korea. I think India can also, and I think this is where the government will have to take on a very set of intelligent decisions about immigration, student visas, and universities will have to take a number of decisions about what kind of support they can offer. And then this backed up with the kind of collaborations Indian universities can do, because in some ways this is a good time for research. I think it's certainly possible. Yeah, I'm very optimistic about that on that front.
But coming back to this digital sort of divide, as I would call it, there is
Mhm.
still some kind of reservations about accepting degrees that are digital rather than somebody who studied on campus, particularly in India. You get a diploma or a degree which is actually from a foreign university, but which is
Mhm.
a digital degree. That doesn't seem to have much value compared to a person who's actually gone and studied there. Do you think that should change, or is that is that a mindset change, or is that a policy change, or how does that work?
Right. I mean, I think the problem is education is big business. So this has become tarnished by all kinds of people, all kinds of stakeholders taking advantage of it and trying to slap our brand on it. And so it has become suspicious. But there are something called, for instance, joint PhDs. There are a number of universities which offer a joint PhD or even a joint degree. Other kinds of joint masters, where it's a mix of online collaboration and some trips, then things like libraries. See, for instance, often for students, a big part is in North American universities have amazing libraries. So if you can somehow unlock the resources for the libraries to students here, a huge part, that becomes a
Mhm.
huge step forward. So, for instance, what we were planning with Wellesley College, that the class at Wellesley and the class at Ashoka would meet on Zoom. So it's not just the two professors teaching, but the classes are also actually getting to interact with each other. And that's actually pretty effective. What I've learned even in the last couple of weeks, that Google and Zoom classes are actually not bad at all. You can, and there are students who've told me that, oh, I feel like I can actually talk more onto a screen. So I think it's not just an online thing, but actually, it's eventually about content. It's eventually about professors putting in their bit, opening up things like libraries, research facilities. So I think we have to get ready to a changed world. We have to get ready to a changed world. And collaboration will take many forms. Virtual is one of them. It's not the only one. It will also include short trips, not just spending the whole time. It will include faculty exchange, student exchange, library exchange. And with a range of things, one can make a collaborative education very possible and sustainable.
I had a specific question in mind. Now, suppose there's a student who's come back, I mean, because of this pandemic to India. How difficult would it be for him or her? Suppose they've taken a loan. How difficult would it be for them to get a refund and then move to another university in terms of sheer bureaucracy? Was that a
Yeah,
very difficult process, or is that something that
that's
you feel can be done?
I guess that's a question which banks will have to deal with. I mean, I'm not sure I know the whole answer to that.
No, but even from the university's point of view, suppose I paid the university some fees, and
Mhm.
now because of this,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've been forced to return home. I demand a refund. I mean, will the universities tend to return it easily?
Yeah, that's the ethical thing to do. So, for instance, what we did at Ashoka is when the students went back home, we refunded the portions due for their board and lodgings. So that had to be refunded if they're not staying there. But of course, classes are going on. So, instruction is going on. So that part continues. But the board and lodging, there's no
Hmm.
reason to charge them. So universities should certainly institute at least a partial or a whole refund. If they've stopped classes completely, then I don't know. I think most universities have tried to keep classes alive. The challenge here again becomes who your students are. I've been talking to my colleagues from IIT and Jamia, and they're saying a lot of our students don't have internet access. Right? They go back to villages where the internet access is so poor. They are living in conditions where it's very hard to even study. So
Hmm.
those are things to be kept in mind, that for many students home is not necessarily the best place to carry on academic life from. So universities have to make a uniformed judgment, keeping everything in mind, keeping who their student bodies. Of course, for people who are pursuing international education, this may not be a huge question, because I'm assuming they are coming from places where at least things like basic internet are quite stable, right?
But what happens, let's say, when a student who goes abroad, I mean, he doesn't have enough, I mean, he somehow goes on a shoestring budget. Many of them take up part-time jobs within the university or somewhere else just to sustain themselves. Do you see that taking a hit somehow?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you see, at any pandemic, any kind of war, the most vulnerable populations are always at the worst risk, right? I mean, I've been hearing stories from my American colleagues that, oh, I'm teaching a class on Skype, and some student is in a bus station. They don't even have a place to stay. It's extremely noisy. What's going on there? It's a Greyhound bus station. I've been living here for the last 2 days. So clearly, the closure of universities have literally thrown some students out of their living rooms. So if you are an international student who are living on a shoestring budget, it's extremely vulnerable. This pandemic has reminded us the importance of social networks. So if you have maybe family in that city, you might be in a better place, and otherwise, even the economy is in such place that who's going to employ you? I mean, I've been reading stories of American cities where entire restaurant industries, entire entertainment industries have shut down. So how many million people in America have now filed for unemployment? So obviously the economy, people who are depending on economy for this are in very difficult shape. The most responsible thing is to declare a window of time within which people can return to their home countries. I don't think this is a
Mhm.
time to hang on, foreign place away from your friends and family.
Which sort of brings me to my next question that, given that the academic year has been totally disrupted in many ways, do you see that having a sort of a domino effect? I mean, that it's not just something that can be fixed 2 years down the line, that, because changes in the way things work because of the time that has been lost?
Yeah, but this is where, it being a global epidemic is actually sort of depressingly good news. That, as I said, the spring of 2020 is going to have an asterisk everywhere. I mean, nobody's going to say, oh, while your grades dipped. And I want to tell all students that don't worry about grades. We all understand what you're going through. This is a very difficult situation. Even we are sort of dealing with that. So this is something there's going to be a global shorthand. It's not something that has affected only one country. Everybody is affected, and everybody
We are
is
sort of
symptomatic.
running out of time a little bit here, but here's another question which, has come, which talks about something that even I was asking, that when you have engineering and sciences and medical class where you have a lot of practical work, how do you do that on a digital form?
Yeah, I think this is a real concern. I think I have to say that the online platform has worked fairly well for humanities and the social sciences, which are primarily reading and discussion driven. I think with practical classes, I know some of my colleagues in the sciences have been saying that lab work is very hard to sort of transcribe, except what you can do through the computer. So that is, so online instruction is also obviously very discipline specific, and every discipline has to come up with its own solution how to adapt instruction online. um, I imagine for business education, so much of business is now in a virtual world. It probably wouldn't be very difficult. But there are obviously domains. I mean, I know very little about science education, but I know even sort of complex medical exercises can be sort of a version of it can be completed through computer mediated exercises. But of course, it's
Hmm.
not the same. So I think it'll depend on disciplines, and every academic
Right.
community must come up with their own solution on how online education is most effective. Right? There's no
Mr.
blanket.
Majumdar, I mean, we ran out of time, but I was just wondering one sort of a thing from my takeaway from our conversation so far was that right now it's not necessary for students to panic. That they should wait and sort of do other things, take a break, as it were.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I think I understood from your thing, and not to fret too much. That thing, there will be a normal, it may be a new normal, but people, you will get used to it. Is that what you wanted to sort of?
I would say exactly. I'd say if you are fortunate enough to have a roof over your head, if you're fortunate enough not to have to worry about things like internet connection, if you're already in a privileged group, which also probably means that you have more time to think. You have more time to think. There are more resources you can access, more people to talk to. So try to keep in touch. What is very important is the social experience of education is also very important. Keep in touch with your peer community, keep in touch with your professors, and a huge amount of learning resources are available online. As you probably know, Coursera has made so many of its courses free now. It's going to remain.
Hmm.
Public libraries have opened up their books. Kindle, on Amazon, so many books have prices have been cut. This is the
That's
best
right.
time in life to learn a new language, to read as much as you can, interact with people. I think this is a time to think. And in a way, I've always sort of favored this whole approach that, okay, if you finish college, take some time, think, work. Of course, it
A
depends on
time
if
to
you
think.
can afford
I'm
it.
sorry, Dr. Majumdar, we have to sort of sign off here. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure a lot of people here must have, gone back with at least an idea of what to do next. Thank you, Dr. Majumdar. And I think we'll end this here. Thank you for watching. We'll be back soon with another edition of Outlook Live. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.